You really have to hear what Thomas Blackwood experienced in the Grand Canyon during that fateful week in November 2025. 8 people entered a restricted section of the canyon's northern rim. Only 1 returned. What Thomas encountered in those ancient depths has remained officially unexplained, though elders of the Hopi Nation have spoken of it in hushed tones for generations. The search and rescue operation lasted 2 weeks, involving 3 helicopters, 27 ground personnel, and cave specialists from 3 states. They found nothing, no bodies, no equipment, no evidence of what happened. Thomas Blackwood was discovered 17 days after the group's disappearance, unconscious on a maintenance road 3 miles from the nearest visitor area. He had lost 42 pounds. His body showed signs of severe dehydration, exposure, and injuries that medical professionals described inconsistent with any known wildlife attack or environmental hazard. The National Park Service officially attributed the disappearances to a flash flood and rockslide. The Coconino County Sheriff's Office listed the 7 missing persons as presumed dead. The case was closed after 4 months. What follows is Thomas Blackwood's account. My name is Thomas Blackwood. I'm 43 years old, a geologist with the Arizona Geological Survey. I've worked there for 16 years, specializing in cave systems and subterranean water tables. My mother was Hopi, from the village of Oraibi on Third Mesa. My father was an Anglo park ranger who met her when he was stationed at Wupatki National Monument. I grew up between those 2 worlds, the traditional Hopi ways and the scientific understanding of the landscape. My grandfather on my mother's side was a traditional knowledge keeper. He told me stories about the canyon that weren't in any textbook. He warned me about certain places where the boundaries are thin, places where the ancient ones still dwell. I dismissed most of it as cultural metaphor, symbolic language describing natural phenomena that science now understands. I was wrong. The expedition team consisted of 7 other members besides myself. Dr. Eleanor Hayes was the team leader, 56 years old, a hydrologist with 30 years of field experience and over 40 published papers on subterranean water systems. She stood 5'4", compact and wiry, with short gray hair and hands covered in the kind of calluses that only come from decades of field work. She'd served 2 tours with USGS in Antarctica and had mapped cave systems on 6 continents. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen every possible field condition and emergency. She never raised her voice, not once. Marcus Chen was our technical specialist, 35, former Army Corps of Engineers with deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq. He handled all our rappelling gear, safety equipment, and technical aspects of deep cave exploration. Kira Wilson was our field medic and safety officer, 41, former wilderness EMT with 15 years of experience in high-angle rescue and remote medical care, 5'10", muscular, with close-cropped black hair and skin darkened by years in the field. She carried a fully stocked wilderness medical kit that weighed 22 pounds. She could stabilize virtually any field injury and had performed emergency procedures under extreme conditions. She'd once sutured her own leg after a fall in the Boundary Waters. The scar ran 9 inches along her right thigh. Michael Rodriguez was our communications and documentation specialist, 32, former marine communications technician who'd worked for National Geographic as a field tech for the past 7 years. 5'9", compact, with the ability to repair delicate electronic equipment in hostile environmental conditions. He maintained our satellite phones, GPS units, and all recording devices. He carried a personal journal where he documented each day with precise timestamps and conditions. The journal was never found. Benjamin Taylor was our sponsor representative, 48, executive director of the Southwest Geological Research Foundation that funded our expedition. No field experience, but insisted on accompanying us to see the investment in action. 6 feet even, slightly overweight, with the soft hands and sunburn-prone skin of someone who spent most of his time indoors. He brought along a .45 caliber sidearm despite our objections, claiming concerns about wild animals. The gun made no difference when it mattered. The expedition began as a straightforward investigation of an anomalous reading. Dr. Hoffman's ground-penetrating radar had detected what appeared to be a previously undocumented cave system in a remote section of the North Rim. The data suggested a massive hollow space nearly 400 feet below the surface, in an area where no caves should exist according to conventional geological understanding. The Foundation approved funding for a 2-week exploratory mission. We obtained special permits from the National Park Service to access a restricted area, under the condition that we document everything and share all findings. What we didn't share in our official proposal was Dr. Hoffman's other discovery: trace radiation readings unlike anything he'd seen before, concentrated around the entrance to what appeared to be a natural shaft leading down toward the anomaly. The readings weren't dangerous, just inexplicable. They didn't match any known natural source. That was what really drew us there. That was what I couldn't resist, despite my grandfather's warnings. He had told me specifically about this part of the canyon when I was a boy. The Hopi call it Sipapu, the place of emergence, where the ancient ones first came into this world from below. Different from the more commonly known Sipapu in Hopi ceremonies, this was a specific location, one that traditional knowledge keepers had passed down through generations with a warning never to disturb it. My grandfather made me promise I would never go there, even as a scientist. That place belongs to them, he would say. They are still there, waiting. The oldest stories say they will return when the world needs cleansing. I broke my promise to him. I convinced myself it was just a story meant to keep people away from dangerous terrain. I was the one who pushed hardest for the expedition once I realized where Hoffman's anomaly was located. We assembled at the North Rim Ranger Station on November 2nd, 2025. The weather report promised clear conditions for the next 10 days, with temperatures ranging from the mid-60s during the day to the mid-30s at night, ideal conditions for the work we planned. We spent the first day checking equipment and reviewing the expedition plan. Dr. Hayes ran us through safety protocols 3 times. Kira inspected everyone's personal medical information and necessary medications. Marcus tested every piece of climbing and safety equipment individually. Our equipment inventory was extensive. Each team member carried a 65-liter expedition pack with personal gear, emergency supplies and role-specific equipment. Base supplies included 2 Hilberg Namati 3 GT expedition tents, a MSR group cooking system, water purification equipment, and emergency shelter materials. Technical gear included over 1,200 feet of dynamic climbing rope, ascenders, descenders, harnesses rated for extended suspension, helmet-mounted lights with redundant battery systems, and cave mapping equipment. Communications included 2 Iridium satellite phones with extended battery packs, short-range radios for team communication, and GPS locator beacons. I remember the precise weight of my pack, 67 pounds, as I hefted it for final inspection. We departed at 0600 on November 3rd. The drive to our drop point took 3 hours along progressively smaller access roads, ending at an unmarked trailhead used primarily by Park Service personnel. The hike to our first camp location would take another 6 hours, following a faint maintenance path before transitioning to off-trail navigation. The North Rim had closed to regular visitors 2 weeks earlier due to seasonal conditions, so we encountered no other people. The landscape was breathtaking in its emptiness. Ponderosa pines gave way to pinyon and juniper as we descended, the morning light casting long shadows across limestone outcroppings. Ravens circled overhead, their calls echoing against canyon walls. We spotted mule deer twice, watching us from the cover of trees before bounding away. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and dust. None of us spoke much during that first day's hike. There was a sense of anticipation, of purpose. We were scientists on our way to discover something unknown. That professional excitement masked the deeper unease I should have recognized. We reached the first camp by mid-afternoon and established our base. The location was a small plateau with a clear view of the surrounding terrain, approximately 2 miles from the anomaly site. Marcus and Michael set up the tents while Dr. Hayes, Hoffman and I reviewed the topographical maps against the actual landscape. Sarah walked the perimeter of our camp, pausing at the cardinal directions to offer small prayers with corn pollen. Benjamin watched her with barely concealed skepticism. Kira established a medical station in the shade of a juniper tree. That first night was perfectly normal. We ate a simple meal of rehydrated chili and cornbread, discussed the next day's approach to the anomaly, and turned in early. The stars were brilliant in the clear sky, the Milky Way a bright path overhead. I remembered watching those same stars with my grandfather, listening to him tell stories of the sky people and their messages. The memory should have been a warning. We broke camp at first light. The approach to the anomaly required traversing a steep limestone slope, then navigating a narrow ravine that didn't appear on any official maps. Dr. Hoffman led the way, consulting his handheld scanner every few minutes to confirm the radiation trace. The ravine deepened as we proceeded, the walls rising gradually until we were walking in permanent shadow. The temperature dropped noticeably. I recorded 52 degrees Fahrenheit at 9:17 a.m., despite the morning sun warming the rim above us to nearly 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Sarah noticed it first. "It's quiet," she said, stopping suddenly. We all paused, listening. She was right. No bird calls, no insects, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush. Even the breeze that had been with us all morning had died away. Just silence, heavy and complete. I've spent hundreds of days in backcountry wilderness. Nature is never silent. There's always something. Wind in trees, insects buzzing, distant bird calls. But there in that ravine, nothing made a sound except us. Dr. Hayes dismissed it as an acoustic anomaly, something about the shape of the ravine absorbing ambient sound. Dr. Hoffman was too focused on his scanner readings to care, but Sarah and I exchanged a look. She knew, as I did, that this wasn't normal. This was the first warning. We continued forward, the ravine narrowing further until we reached what appeared to be a dead end, a vertical wall of limestone streaked with mineral deposits. Dr. Hoffman's excitement was palpable as his scanner showed the strongest readings yet. "It's right through here," he said, running his hand over the rock face. "The hollow space begins approximately 40 feet beyond this wall. It took us nearly an hour of careful examination to find it. A narrow crack in the rock face hidden behind a stunted juniper, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through sideways. Cool air flowed from the opening, carrying a scent I couldn't immediately identify, something mineral and old, like wet stone that hadn't seen sunlight in millennia. Marcus approached it professionally, shining his light inside, testing the edges for stability. "Natural formation," he confirmed. "Looks like it opens up about 10 feet in. I can see a larger chamber." He secured a safety line to a solid anchor point and prepared to enter first, following standard protocol. Sarah stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Wait," she said. She knelt by the entrance and examined something on the ground that the rest of us had missed. Small pictographs etched into the stone, weathered almost to invisibility. She traced them with her finger, her expression growing concerned. "These are warning markers," she said quietly. "Very old. They match symbols found at certain Hopi sites." She looked up at me, knowing my background. "They're boundary markers. They're saying not to go beyond this point." Benjamin scoffed. "Native graffiti," he said. "Probably not even authentic." Dr. Hayes was more diplomatic but equally dismissive, suggesting we document the markings but proceed as planned. I should have backed Sarah up. I should have remembered my grandfather's warnings more clearly. Instead, I compromised. "We should proceed with extra caution," I said. "Document everything. No unnecessary risks." Sarah looked at me with disappointment. She knew I understood more than I was admitting. Marcus entered the crack first, moving carefully sideways until he disappeared from view. His voice came back over the radio. "Opening widens into a chamber about 15 feet across. Ceiling height approximately 12 feet. Natural formation. Limestone, some stalactite development. Appears stable." One by one we followed him through the narrow passage. The chamber beyond was exactly as Marcus had described. A roughly circular room with a domed ceiling, from which hung small stalactites like stone fingers. Our headlamps created overlapping pools of light that revealed smooth walls polished by ancient water flow. The floor sloped gently toward the center, where a perfectly circular hole, about 4 feet in diameter, opened into darkness below. Dr. Hoffman moved to the hole immediately, his scanner beeping more rapidly. "This is it," he said. "This shaft leads directly to the main anomaly." He lay flat on his stomach and extended his handheld light into the opening. The beam disappeared into blackness without illuminating a bottom. He dropped a small glow stick into the hole. We watched it fall, a green star descending until it vanished. We never heard it hit bottom. Marcus began setting up rigging for a controlled descent. He established anchor points in the solid limestone, tested each one methodically, and prepared the main line. "I'll go first," he said. "Standard procedure. I'll descend 50 feet, secure a position and report back. If everything checks out, the rest can follow one by one." We agreed on a communication protocol, radio check every 20 feet of descent, and immediate report of any concerns. Marcus did a final equipment check, attached himself to the line, and began lowering himself into the hole. The beam of his headlamp grew smaller as he descended, until it was just a point of light in the darkness below. 20 feet, he reported over the radio. Shaft continues straight down. Walls are smooth, almost polished. No visible handholds or ledges. Continuing descent. 40 feet, shaft still uniform. Wait, there's something different about the rock here. The texture changes. I don't know how to describe it. Almost like it's not natural stone anymore. Continuing descent. 60 feet. I think the shaft opens into a larger space below. Can't tell dimensions yet. The air feels different down here, heavier somehow. Continuing descent. 80 feet. I can definitely see a chamber below. Large, can't see the far walls or ceiling with my light. Floor appears to be about 30 feet further down. Continuing descent. 100 feet. Almost to the floor. The chamber is huge, really huge. My light can't reach the walls or ceiling. The floor it's not stone, it's not natural, oh God. His last transmission cut off abruptly. We called his name over the radio repeatedly. No response. Dr. Hayes immediately implemented emergency protocols. Michael began preparing a second line for a rescue descent. Kira readied medical equipment. I moved to the edge of the hole, shining my most powerful light downward. Then we heard it, rising up like heat, a scream, Marcus's voice, but wrong somehow. It started as a normal human sound, then shifted into something vocal cords shouldn't produce. A multi-toned, harmonizing howl that rose in pitch until it was almost beyond hearing range, then suddenly stopped. Then silence, the kind of silence that has weight. Dr. Hayes made the decision. "Michael, you're going down." Michael geared up quickly and began lowering into the darkness. 20 feet, shaft clear, continuing descent. 40 feet. Noting the change in rock texture Marcus mentioned, it's almost like the stone becomes organic at this point. Continuing descent. 60 feet. I can see the opening to the chamber below. No visual on Marcus or his light. Continuing descent. 80 feet. Chamber is extremely large. Ceiling height impossible to determine with available light. Still no visual on Marcus. Continuing descent. 100 feet. Approaching the floor. The surface this isn't stone. This isn't natural. It appears to be, I don't know how to describe this. It's moving slightly, like breathing. I can see Marcus's light about 50 feet away on what appears to be a raised section. Continuing descent to floor level. Touchdown on the floor. Surface is solid but yields slightly under pressure. Temperature approximately 65 Fahrenheit. No visible moisture. Air quality seems breathable but has an unusual scent. Moving toward Marcus's position now, we listened intently. The radio speaker in Dr. Hayes's hand held so all could hear. Michael's breathing was audible as he moved across whatever surface he was walking on. Then his footsteps stopped. I've reached Marcus's equipment. Harness, helmet with headlamp still on, radio, all gear present. No sign of Marcus himself. No signs of struggle or injury. It's as if he simply stepped out of his gear and walked away. But that's not possible. The harness is still fully closed and secured. Dr. Hayes spoke into the radio. Michael, return to the shaft immediately. Do not attempt to search further alone. Understood. Returning now. We heard his footsteps resume, quicker now. Something's not right down here. The floor, it's changing texture as I walk. And there's a sound. Very low, almost below hearing range. Like a bear. The radio erupted with static. When it cleared, we heard Michael breathing heavily. Running? Something's coming. I can't see it. Just darkness moving in the darkness. Moving fast. I'm almost at the shaft, 20 feet. A sound came through the radio that I will forget. Not a scream like Marcus had made. A wet, tearing sound. Brief, final. Then nothing. 2 team members gone in less than 15 minutes. Dr. Hayes stared at the radio in her hand. Her professional demeanor cracked for just a moment, showing the fear beneath. Then she was back in control. We're aborting the mission. Immediately. We'll secure the site and contact emergency services once we're back in range. She turned to begin disconnecting the rigging from the hole. That's when we heard it. A humming sound, rising from the darkness below. Not mechanical, not human. Multiple tones overlapping in harmonies that seemed to vibrate in the bones of my skull rather than my ears. The sound grew louder, resolving into something almost like words, but in no language I recognized. Dr. Hoffman moved toward the hole, not away from it. His face had a strange expression, not fear, but fascination. The readings are off the charts, he said, looking at his scanner. This is it. This is what I've been searching for. Before anyone could stop him, he had moved to the edge of the shaft and was staring down into it with an expression of rapture. James, get back, Dr. Hayes shouted, reaching for him. Too late, he leaned forward, overbalancing, and fell. There was no scream, just the sound of his body hitting the sides of the shaft several times as he tumbled. Then silence. The humming from below grew louder. Panic broke us. Benjamin was the first to run, pushing past Sarah toward the crack we had entered through. Kira shouted for order, trying to maintain emergency protocols. Dr. Hayes was frozen, staring at the hole where 3 of her team members had vanished. Sarah grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in painfully. We have to leave, she said. Now, they are waking, they are hungry. I didn't ask who they were. Some part of me already knew. The ancient ones my grandfather had warned me about. The ones who had emerged from the depths in the oldest Hopi stories, who had shaped the world that came before this one, who had retreated back below when they were done with the surface. We moved toward the exit as a group. Sarah, Kira, Dr. Hayes, and myself. Benjamin had already disappeared through the crack. The humming from below was changing, becoming more distinct, more directed. It seemed to follow us, rising in volume and intensity as we reached the narrow passageway out. Sarah went through first, then Kira. I waited for Dr. Hayes, who was moving slowly, almost reluctantly, looking back at the hole. Eleanor, I said sharply, we have to go now. She nodded, but her eyes were unfocused, distant. She took 2 steps toward me, then stopped. I can understand it, she whispered. The sound. It's a language, the oldest language. It's beautiful. She turned back toward the hole. I reached for her arm, but she was already moving away from me, back toward the center of the chamber. Her movements were wrong, too fluid, as if her joints were bending in ways they shouldn't. I made a choice. I left her there. I squeezed through the crack, back into the ravine beyond, where Sarah and Kira waited. Benjamin was nowhere to be seen. The 3 of us didn't speak. We just ran, moving as fast as possible back up the ravine toward our camp. The silence around us was complete. No birds, no insects, no wind, just the sound of our breathing and footsteps on stone. The light seemed wrong too flat, as if the sun had dimmed slightly. Everything felt muted, distant, as if we were moving through a world that was slightly out of phase with reality. We reached the camp by late afternoon. Benjamin was there, frantically shoving equipment into his pack, with no regard for proper procedure. When he saw us, he drew his pistol. "Stay back," he said, his voice shaking. "Whatever happened to you down there, I'm not letting it happen to me." Kira approached him with her hands raised. "Benjamin, put the gun down. Nothing's happened to us. We need to work together to get out of here safely." Her voice was steady, the trained calm of a medical professional used to crisis situations. "Liar," he hissed. "I can see it in your eyes, all of you. You're not the same. You heard it too. The voice from below." He backed away, the gun wavering between us. "I'm leaving now. Alone. Don't follow me." Before we could respond, he turned and ran, heading not toward our original entry trail but directly east, toward the rim. Kira made to follow him, but Sarah stopped her. "Let him go," she said. "We need to focus on our own survival now." We quickly gathered essential supplies: water, emergency rations, first aid kit, one satellite phone, GPS locator, and basic overnight gear. Our plan was simple: return to the trailhead as quickly as possible, following our original route. We estimated it would take us until well after dark, but none of us wanted to spend another night this close to the site. We departed within 30 minutes, moving quickly despite our fatigue. The shadows were lengthening, the temperature dropping rapidly as evening approached. We maintained a grueling pace for the first hour, putting as much distance as possible between ourselves and the ravine. The humming found us just before sunset. It started as a vibration more felt than heard, rising from the ground beneath our feet. Then it resolved into that same multi-toned sound we had heard in the chamber, but now it seemed to come from all directions at once. We stopped, instinctively forming a circle, backs to each other, scanning the terrain around us. "It followed us," Sarah whispered. "They followed us." The landscape hadn't changed, but somehow it felt different. The familiar formations of juniper trees and limestone outcroppings now seemed alien, wrong, as if we were looking at a perfect replica of the world rather than the world itself. The light had taken on a grayish quality that drained color from everything around us. Kira tried the satellite phone. No signal, despite clear line of sight to the sky. The GPS unit showed only static. Our equipment was functioning. Lights worked. Radios communicated between units. But anything designed to connect us to the outside world was dead. The humming grew louder as darkness fell. We decided to continue moving, using our headlamps to navigate the increasingly treacherous terrain. None of us spoke about what had happened in the chamber. None of us speculated about what had happened to our missing teammates. We focused only on the immediate goal: distance, safety, escape. We were approximately 4 miles from the trailhead when Kira saw it. She stopped suddenly, her headlamp beam fixed on something ahead of us. "There's someone on the trail," she said quietly. Her voice was flat, emotionless, as if she was trying very hard not to reveal what she was really feeling. I looked where her light pointed. At first I saw nothing, just the pale path winding between juniper trees. Then I noticed the stillness, a human-shaped stillness that didn't belong. A figure standing motionless on the path about 50 yards ahead, facing away from us. The proportions were wrong. Too tall, at least 7 feet. Too thin. The arms hung at its sides but seemed to reach below where knees should be. "It's not human," Sarah whispered. "Don't move. Don't speak." We froze in place, watching. The figure remained motionless for what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes. Then, with a movement too quick and fluid to follow properly, it turned to face us. The headlamp beams caught it full on. I wish they hadn't. I wish I could erase what I saw from my memory. It had Marcus's face, not attached to a body, but stretched over something that only approximately resembled human form. The skin was pulled too tight across a skull structure that was both more and less than human. The eyes were black pools that reflected our lights like oil. The mouth was fixed in a Richter smile that extended literally from ear to ear, showing teeth that were too numerous, too sharp, and arranged in concentric circles down a throat that should not exist in a human head. The body below was wrong in ways that my mind still refuses to properly process. Jointed in too many places. Limbs that bent backward, forward, sideways. A torso that seemed to expand and contract, not with breath but with some other internal rhythm. Skin that shifted between translucency and solid matter as it moved. It tilted what should have been its head, the movement mechanical and precise. Then it spoke with Marcus's voice, perfect and unchanged. "Guys, I found something amazing. You need to come see this." Sarah began to pray in Hopi, a soft, desperate stream of words. Kira took a step backward, then another. I stood frozen, unable to look away from the thing wearing my colleague's face. It took a step toward us. The movement was wrong, a gliding insectile motion that covered more distance than should have been possible with a single step. Suddenly it was 30 yards away instead of 50. "Guys, what's wrong?" "It's just me. It's Marcus." The voice was perfect, but the mouth moved all wrong, the words forming from that spiraling tooth-lined gullet rather than human lips and tongue. Something broke inside me, some final barrier of rationality and denial. I turned and ran, grabbing Sarah's arm as I moved. Kira was already ahead of us, sprinting down the path with reckless speed. Behind us, Marcus's voice called out once more, "Don't leave me here," and then changed, shifting into that multi-toned humming that rose and fell in patterns just almost recognizable as language. We ran blindly, headlamp beams bouncing crazily across the landscape. The path became a blur beneath our feet. Several times we nearly fell as loose rocks shifted underfoot. The air seemed to thicken around us as if we were running through water rather than air. The humming followed, always just behind us, never getting closer but never falling away. I don't know how long we ran. Time seemed to stretch and compress randomly. The stars overhead shifted position in ways that didn't match their natural movement. The moon appeared, disappeared, reappeared in different phases. At one point I looked up and saw 3 moons of different sizes hanging in a sky that had too many stars, arranged in constellations I didn't recognize. We reached a small clearing and stopped, gasping for breath. Kira bent double, hands on knees, drawing in great lungfuls of air. Sarah leaned against a boulder, her face slick with sweat despite the cold night air. I turned to scan the path behind us with my headlamp. Nothing. No figure following, no movement in the darkness between the trees. But the humming was still there, fainter now, coming from everywhere and nowhere. "We need to keep moving," Kira said between breaths. "The trailhead can't be more than 2 miles now." Sarah shook her head. "It doesn't matter how far we go. They're not behind us, they're ahead of us too. They're all around us. We've crossed into their world." Before we could respond, a scream cut through the night. High, desperate, human. Benjamin's voice coming from somewhere to our right, off the main path. Without discussing it, we moved toward the sound. Despite everything, we couldn't ignore a human cry for help. We found him in a small wash about 100 yards from the main trail. He was on his knees, his backpack and gun discarded on the ground beside him. He was staring at something on the ground in front of him, something our headlamp beams couldn't quite illuminate properly. A darkness that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Benjamin," Kira called softly. "Are you hurt? We need to keep moving." He didn't respond or look up. As we drew closer, I could see his lips moving rapidly, forming words with no sound. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated fully, despite the light hitting his face. He was looking not at, but into the patch of darkness on the ground. Sarah grabbed my arm, stopping me from getting any closer. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't look into it. That's how they take you." Too late I realized the humming had changed. It was coming from the darkness on the ground now, rising in volume and complexity, forming patterns that almost made sense to my human ears. Almost like words, almost like names. My name among others. Benjamin suddenly looked up at us, his face transforming into an expression of perfect joy. "I understand now," he said, his voice dreamy and distant. "It's beautiful. The oldest language, the first people. They want to show us." He reached his hand toward the darkness. The darkness reached back. What happened next defies description in any human language I know. The darkness extended itself, not as a substance or entity, but as an absence that moved with purpose. It flowed up Benjamin's extended arm like liquid shadow, spreading across his body. He didn't scream, he smiled wider as the darkness covered him, consumed him, erased him from existence inch by inch. His eyes were the last to go, still staring at us with that expression of ecstatic joy until the moment they were gone. Then there was nothing where Benjamin had been, no body, no blood, nothing but that patch of darkness, which seemed smaller now, satisfied somehow. Sarah was praying again, her voice a near silent stream of Hopi words. Kira had backed away to the edge of the small clearing, her headlamp beam darting frantically from the ground to the trees around us and back again. I stood frozen, unable to process what I had just witnessed. The humming changed again, becoming a purring vibration that I felt in my chest more than heard with my ears. The darkness on the ground began to expand outward, flowing across the stony soil like spilled oil. "Run," Sarah finally said. "Now, don't look back." We ran, back to the main trail, then east toward where the trailhead should be. The landscape around us continued to shift and change in impossible ways. Trees appeared where no trees had been before. Rock formations rearranged themselves when we weren't looking directly at them. The stars overhead swirled in patterns that made my head hurt when I tried to track them. The humming was everywhere now, coming from the ground, the air, the trees, the rocks. It was inside my head too, resonating in my skull, vibrating in my teeth and bones. Words began to form in my mind. Not English words, not Hopi words, but something older, something that human vocal cords were never meant to pronounce. I don't know when we lost Kira. One moment she was running ahead of us on the trail, her headlamp beam bouncing in the darkness. The next moment her light was gone, and when we rounded a bend in the path she wasn't there. No sound, no struggle, no goodbye. She was simply gone, as if she had never existed at all. Sarah and I didn't stop, we couldn't. The trail ahead began to slope upward, which meant we were approaching the rim. The trailhead would be just beyond. Safety, escape, normalcy. We pushed ourselves harder, lungs burning, legs shaking with exhaustion. We reached a recognizable landmark, a distinctive pinyon pine that marked the final approach to the trailhead. Just half a mile more. We could make it. The humming seemed to recede slightly, as if reluctant to follow us this close to the boundary of its domain. Sarah stopped suddenly, her hand clutching my arm with desperate strength. "Listen," she whispered. I stopped, straining to hear past the pounding of blood in my ears. At first I heard nothing but our ragged breathing and the ever-present humming. Then I heard it. Footsteps on the trail ahead. Multiple sets, moving toward us at a steady pace. Our headlamps illuminated them as they rounded the bend in the trail. Dr. Hayes, Marcus, Michael, Dr. Hoffman, all of them walking side by side, blocking the path completely, all of them smiling with two wide mouths, all of them moving with that same wrong fluidity, as if their joints functioned differently from human anatomy. "We've been waiting for you," Dr. Hayes said, but the voice wasn't hers. It was that humming sound shaped into words, forced through human vocal cords that weren't designed for such sounds. "The ancient ones are awake now. They are hungry. They have been waiting so long." Sarah began to back away, pulling me with her. The figures on the path matched our movement, stepping forward as we stepped back. Their faces never changed expression, frozen in those terrible smiles that extended too far across their faces. Their eyes reflected our headlamp beams like animals' eyes, glowing and empty. "You woke us," Marcus said, his voice the same multi-toned humming barely forced into English. "Now we will wake everyone. The cleansing begins again, as it has before, as it always must." I turned to run back the way we had come, but the path behind us was gone, replaced by a sheer rock wall that hadn't been there before. We were trapped. Sarah stepped in front of me, facing the approaching figures. She began to speak in Hopi, not prayers this time, but something that sounded like commands, like banishment words. The ancient ones wearing our colleagues' faces hesitated, their movements becoming less fluid, more jerky and uncertain. "Go," she said to me without turning around. "I will hold them. My grandfather taught me the old words. Go now, while they are confused." She continued the Hopi chant, her voice growing stronger, more assured. The figures on the path stopped advancing, their faces twisting in expressions that weren't quite pain but something adjacent to it. I wanted to stay with her, I wanted to help, but there was nothing I could do. I had no knowledge, no words of power, no connection to the ancient understanding that Sarah wielded. I was useless. "Thomas," she said, still facing the entities, "remember what you see. Tell the elders. The ancient ones are waking, the world must know." She raised her hands, palms outward toward the figures, and her chanting reached a crescendo. The figures screamed, not with human voices, but with that same terrible multi-toned howl we had heard in the chamber. The sound physically hurt, vibrating in my bones and teeth, making my vision blur. I pressed my hands to my ears and stumbled backward, away from the confrontation. I found a narrow gap in the rock wall behind us, barely wide enough to squeeze through. I looked back once. Sarah stood facing the entities, her body rigid, her voice never faltering, despite the hurricane of sound they directed at her. The entities had begun to change, their borrowed human forms melting and reshaping into something else, something I could not look at directly without feeling my mind begin to slip toward madness. I turned away and forced myself through the gap in the rock wall. I fell forward into darkness, tumbling down a steep slope of loose rock and dirt. Pain shot through my body as I rolled, helpless to stop my descent. My headlamp shattered against stone. Darkness swallowed me. I don't remember much after that. Fragments only, crawling through absolute darkness. The humming all around me, sometimes distant, sometimes so close it seemed to come from inside my own body. Thirst that burned like fire. Hunger that gnawed at my insides. Cold that numbed my extremities. Pain from injuries I couldn't see to assess. I remember finding water, a small seep in the rock that provided barely enough moisture to keep me alive. I remember following what felt like a draft of fresh air, crawling on hands and knees when I could no longer walk. I remember the stars when I finally emerged into the open air. Normal stars in familiar constellations, a single moon in its proper phase. They found me on a maintenance road, 3 miles from the visitor center, a seasonal ranger doing final checks before winter closure. I was unconscious, severely dehydrated, my body covered in cuts, bruises and wounds that the doctors later said didn't match any known pattern of injury. I told them everything. The Park Service investigators, the Coconino County Sheriff's deputies, the FBI agents who appeared on the 3rd day of my hospital stay, I held nothing back. They took detailed statements, recorded hours of testimony, filled notebooks with my descriptions of what happened. Then they filed a report concluding that a flash flood and rockslide had separated our group, that I had been lucky to survive, and that my confused mental state was the result of dehydration, exposure, and trauma. They called it a tragic accident. They closed the case. I went to the Hopi elders when I was released from the hospital. They listened to my story without interruption, without skepticism. When I finished, the oldest among them nodded slowly. "The Masau warned us," he said. "The ancient ones sleep below, but their sleep grows restless. The boundary thins. You broke through. Now they have a way out. What can we do?" I asked him. He looked at me with eyes that had seen nearly a century of life, that carried the wisdom of countless generations before him. "Nothing," he said simply. "They were here before us. They will be here after us. This world is only borrowed from them. Now they want it back." I left Arizona after that. I moved to Maine, as far from the Grand Canyon as I could get without leaving the country. I took a job teaching basic geology at a community college. I avoid caves, enclosed spaces, darkness. I keep the lights on all night. But it doesn't matter how far I go. Some nights I wake to that humming sound vibrating in my skull. Some nights I see them in my dreams, not just my lost colleagues, but others. Hundreds of others. Thousands. All walking with that wrong fluidity. All smiling with mouths that extend too far. All speaking with voices that are not their own. The ancient ones are waking. The Hopi prophecy warned of this time when those who went below would return to cleanse the world again. I broke the boundary. I helped them find the way out. Now they're spreading, one person at a time, wearing human faces, moving among us. And sometimes, in the deepest part of night, I find myself listening for that humming sound, finding comfort in its patterns, understanding words that no human should understand. And I wonder how much of me truly escaped from that darkness, and how much of the darkness came back with me.